Hi there, and welcome to this tutorial on installing WordPress locally using MAMP. Setting up a local environment with MAMP is a great way to develop and test your WordPress site without needing a live server. In this video, I'll walk you through downloading MAMP, configuring it for WordPress, and getting a local WordPress site up and running on your own computer. This setup is perfect for developers, designers, and beginners who want a safe environment to experiment with WordPress. Let's get started. The first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to download MAMP. In addition to MAMP, you're going to also need to download WordPress. Let's go ahead and do that now. We'll start off by going to the MAMP website. When you type in mamp.info/en, if you are in an English-speaking country, it will automatically detect what operating system you're using and go ahead and take you to that page. So I am on a Mac, it's taking me to the Mac page, and it's giving me some information about MAMP. There should be a download button in the upper right-hand corner. You're simply going to click this and download MAMP. And you will see that it is going to thank you for downloading the application, indicating that you have it downloaded. Before we leave our web browser, we're also going to go to wordpress.org. This is the location where you can download WordPress as a zip file. There should be a button in the upper right-hand corner or some other location that is predominantly available on the page. It should say something like Get WordPress. So I will go ahead and click this button to download WordPress as well. There is an installation guide and there is additional information here if you need it, but I'm going to walk you through everything. Once you've downloaded both of these things, you are ready to go. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to extract or unzip the files. We'll start off by installing MAMP. I'm going to double click on this. It's going to unzip the file, and then I'm going to double click on the downloader and just follow the instructions that are prompted to me so that I can install the actual application. So you're going to walk through the various processes. It may take a couple of minutes to do this. I will speed through this once my installation is complete. At this point, MAMP is going to walk you through the install procedures and you're just going to follow the instructions. It should be very straightforward. It's going to give you some important information about how MAMP works on your operating system and computer. It's going to ask you to agree to their licensing agreement. And then you're going to go ahead and install, and it of course will tell you where it's going to install the application and how much space it is going to take. It's going to ask for my password, and then I'll simply click Install Software. It's going to run through the installation process, and when that is done, we will be ready to go. The installation was successfully installed. I'll close this window, and I'm going to move this to the trash. At this point, if I go to my application area on my computer, you will see that I do have a folder called MAMP. There are all of the necessary items that we will need in order to run MAMP. I'm going to make a shortcut of the MAMP application so that I can easily start this from my dock. So I will go ahead and make a shortcut right here. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to double click to unzip the WordPress folder. This now is going to give me a folder with all of the necessary WordPress items, and we will need this in order to install WordPress. Before we go ahead and do this, let's open up MAMP. When you first go ahead and launch MAMP, it will continually ask you if you want to get MAMP Pro. This is not necessary. You could easily use the free version of MAMP, so I'm simply going to close this window. And if you don't want to see this again, you can uncheck this so that this window is not going to show continually. Inside of MAMP, I do want to take you to the preference area. If you click right here, this is where you can control your preferences. When you start up the MAMP, I generally have it start the servers, so I like to check this. I'm going to leave everything else at the default settings. If you go to the port tab right here, you can go ahead and alter the ports. By default, MAMP is going to set the Apache port to 888 and also the SQL port to 8889. These settings should work, but some people do recommend that you use port 80 for the Apache port and 3306 for the SQL port. So if you do have any problems using these default settings, you can go ahead and use 80 and 3306 and see if that helps. But for me, I'm just going to use these default settings. The other tabs right here, we don't need to change anything, so I'm just going to leave these as is and I'll click OK. Next thing, make sure that my servers are started. Now, because I went into the preferences and said that I wanted the servers to be started, that's going to happen the next time I launch MAMP. But at this point, I would need to manually start my servers. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to click this button right here, and this is how you can manually start or stop the servers if you need to. It is worth mentioning that the servers must be running in order for MAMP to actually function. As soon as you do this, it should open the MAMP browser window for you. And this is where it's going to give you more information about MAMP. The only thing that we need to do right here is we need to go to the Tools section, and we're going to go to PHP My Admin. We will be using a MySQL database, which is one of the most popular relational databases out there. And it is an open source database and very accessible. All WordPress websites run on MySQL databases. You don't really need to understand all of the ins and outs about how MySQL works or databases in general, but you should understand that databases are used to store data. So things like usernames, blog posts, images, comments, anything that you can think of that would be part of the website is stored in the database if you're working with a dynamic website such as WordPress. So once we go to this PHP My Admin section, we will be able to create a new database. What we're going to do is we're going to click the database tab right here, and this is going to allow us to create a database. All you have to do in order to create a database is to simply give your database a name. For this particular example, I'm just going to call this example 1. The database name can be anything you want. It just cannot contain any spaces, and you shouldn't use any sort of funky characters. At this point, I'm ready to create the database. I'll click the Create button right here, and then the database has been created. And you can see that here's my database, example 1. That is pretty much all we need to do. We need to make sure that we know the name of the database, but other than that, we don't really need to do anything else here. I am going to go back out to my Finder, and the next step is we need to take this unzipped WordPress folder and we need to move this into the proper location. So I will right click and copy this folder. Then I'm going to navigate into the area where I have MAMP installed. So for me, that's in my application folder. I will go ahead and find MAMP. I'm going to go into the folder and I am going to place a copy of the WordPress folder inside the htdocs folder. Once I'm inside the htdocs folder, I'm simply going to right click and paste that entire WordPress folder here. Now, what I like to do is I like to change the name of the WordPress folder because it is common that I would be working on more than one WordPress website at a time. So folders to be named the same. So I'm just going to simply click on this folder and we'll just call this example for now. You can name this anything you want. It should be noted that you don't use any spaces and or funky characters. Now I have my WordPress website in here. I'm calling it example. It could be the name of your company or client that you're working on, or something that would be meaningful to you. At this point, I am ready to get WordPress installed. So we are going to go back to our browser, and I still have the localhost webpage open, which MAMP opened for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of everything after the localhost :8888 / and I need to type of folder that I placed into htdocs. So for me, that is example. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in. I'll hit return or enter, and that is going to take me to the WordPress 5-minute install page. The first thing that you're going to be prompted with is to pick the language that you want to use. I am going to be using English, so I will click continue. And then WordPress is going to let you know that you need to know the database name, the database username, the database password, the database host, and a table prefix. Our database name is called example1. My database username by default when we use MAMP is root. The database password by default is also root. And then the database host is going to be localhost. So we have all the information we need. We're going to click Let's Go. And then it's going to ask us to enter this information. So our database name needs to match the name of the database that we created. In our case, we called it example1. The username, as I mentioned, is going to be root. The password is going to be root. And the database host is already populated with localhost. And by default, the table prefix is going to be WP_, which is completely fine for me. So I am going to use these default settings, and I'm going to click submit. If you are installing WordPress on a live hosting environment, the steps to install WordPress is very similar. You may have to use phpMyAdmin to set up the database, and then when you're installing WordPress, you would need to know the database name, your username, your password, and your database host. The username and password are going to be something other than root, but when we work locally using MAMP, we will be using root and root. I will click submit, and we're going to get the All Right Sparky window that let us know that we're ready to run the installation. I will click this, and WordPress is going to ask me a couple of additional questions. The first one being, what is the site title? You can always change this later of your website. I'm going to just use example. The username is the username that we are going to use to log in to our WordPress website. I'm simply going to use my name. Typically, you would want to use a strong password. Because I am hosting my website locally on my own computer and nobody else is going to have access to it, I'm going to use a weak password, which in this case is just going to be my name again. If you do choose a weak password, you'll have to confirm the use of a weak password. And then finally, you'll need to enter an email address. And this should be an email address that you check on a regular basis. For my demonstration here, I'm just going to use a dummy email address, but normally we would want to use an email address that is active. You have this option to discourage indexing the site. Once again, because I am developing locally, this doesn't really pertain to me. I don't really care either way because search engines are not going to be able to access my computer. So at this point, I'm good to go. I'll click Install WordPress, and very quickly, WordPress has been installed. So now I'm ready to log in, and very conveniently, there's a login button right here. I'm going to click this. It's going to take me to the login page, and I will need to enter my username and password that I just created. And I'm going to click login, and there we go. Here is our WordPress website. So just as if I installed this on a host, this is exactly what WordPress is going to look like. I can do everything that I could do if this website was a live website. It basically is exactly, we have all of the same options available, and WordPress is going to run in the same way. So that is it. We have now installed WordPress locally, and we can begin to develop our website and do whatever we need to do using WordPress.